Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be showing my London League Game 3. I was playing the very strong player Conor Murphy, and I've actually played him before in a previous video where he was essentially better throughout the entire game, but then right at the end he blundered in time pressure, so I was able to win. But my hopes weren't exactly high going into this match. Time control 45 minutes with 15-second increments. And it was a 4-board match in the London League, with this being played on board 1. And he played white. I decided this time not to play the Caracan and to play c5 against his king's pawn opening. So we have a Sicilian opening. Bishop b5 check. I chose bishop d7. I don't know this theory as well as I probably should do. I remember I played somebody in the London Metropolitan Open, I believe, which was my first ever open tournament that I played in standard play controls, time controls, and I drew with I beat a player called what's his name, Matt Didek, who was about 2,100 FIDE, and he played this against me, and then I think I'd played knight d7 though, and he told me it wasn't the right move. So I vaguely remembered this. And now I took with the knight, castles, and knight gf6 with queen e2 being played. I think I've seen positions with knight c3, and queen e2 is maybe a little unusual. So I did think about playing e5 here, just to stop white being able to play pawn d4. However, I don't really like that kind of position, so I chose e6 in the end. d4. Takes, and a6 to prevent any knight b5 shenanigans. c4, and we now reach a Maroczy bind Sicilian. I believe this is the canal attack. White gains space. They control all these light squares. They have f5, d5, b5, e4, c4, all under control. And black is a bit cramped. Luckily, with the trade of bishops, that has helped me a lot. And possibly the position is level, but it's a kind of position where either side with one significant mistake can just be losing, or significantly worse. So rook c8 and b3, protecting the pawn. It's the kind of play I do, with solidifying my c4 and e4 pawns, keeping the space and the control of the light squares. White does a fianchetto, and I castle on the king's side. Then after knight c3, rook e8, I'm lining up with the white queen, and usually in these sort of positions black does aim to play pawn d5 and open up the e and c files for the rooks. White plays rook d1, lining up with my queen, so I get out the way. f4, trying to charge at me. The idea of pawn f5 is quite strong. Also, if I play d5, they might be able to play pawn e5, which is always a bit scary. I play bishop f8, and the idea behind that is partly that I might fianchetto myself with g6. Also, it prevents their bishop on b2 ever having too much attack on g7 in front of my king. And the most important bit is that my rook is now got a clearer line of sight to the white queen. King h1 is chosen. Very sensible move, actually. It's not easy to appreciate it fully. The problem that white often runs into is that I can throw in checks later in the game with moves like queen c5, which would attack the king on g1. Also, the move d5 and bishop c5 could be useful, and even more awkward, I can very occasionally play the idea of knight g4 going to bishop c5 or queen f2, leading to even worse problems. So king h1 is a very good safety move, and because I haven't got a light squared bishop anymore, it's very unlikely I can throw in a check at an opportune moment. And white doesn't need to rush. They've got the position fairly controlled, more space, and it's easier to maneuver into better and better setups. I play queen a5, trying to sort of slowly work my way out of my problems by pressuring the queen side. Then g4 is what I thought he might play, trying to go g5. And this can easily lead to lost positions. I had a game at Hastings 2019, I think, where I played a game with this setup when I was white, except I had a bishop on g2 as well, and they had a bishop on b7 with the pawn on b6. And I was able to essentially just crash my way through on the king side with this march of pawns. So I was a bit scared of this line. I thought I'd have to try and counter in the centre at some stage with either e5 or d5. But instead, Conor chose an alternative knight f3. Now I decide d5 is in my best interests. e5, still clamping down on my position. Now he's taking control of the dark squares instead. I played bishop b4, trying to go for counterattacks. Maybe I can trade pieces to make the burden of surviving their attacks less worrisome, because the fewer pieces there are, the less likely they are to have a devastating checkmating attack on me. And it also makes him think a while, so I'm also playing a kind of meta game with him, hoping he'll go down on time and then make some errors later in the match. Apparently rook c1 is a very good move, but e takes f6 also looks interesting, which is what he played. I have to take the knight. Then we trade bishops, which hopefully is good for me. And I think here pawn takes is fairly useful. Queen takes, so I've got my queen out of any danger later on. White definitely still has a plus, but with my rook on c8 being more useful and my rook on e8 still lined up with the queen, I wasn't feeling too bad yet. And there's plenty of good moves. There's the rook on d1 moving up to d3, which was I was most afraid of. The idea is to then move the knight and play rook g3. So apparently knight c5 is best, and it leads to really complicated positions where white just has this constant edge. So this could be awkward for me. That was probably the improvement that he missed, because when he did c takes d5, I took back. I do have a weak d5 pawn, but my pieces are active enough. I don't think it's lost for black. Knight e5, trying to gain space and pressure me. I defend the pawn. Rook c1. And my feeling was that with enough trades, even a pawn down, I could probably draw if it was a rook and pawn endgame. So I go knight g4, attempting to trade knights, and he obliges. Then attempts to control the center with the queen. I am going for various tactics. Queen takes d5 is not so good because, well, queen f4 would be one move, which could be very good for me. So h3, trying to kick my queen off the good square. So queen g3, I'm aiming for draws with queen take with a rook to e1 and then queen takes back. So he goes f5. He's now threatening queen takes d5. I now decide that I want to draw, so I'm arranging a perpetual setup. He captures the pawn. I go for check. And now we reach this position where I was thinking that if I could just get my queen to check him on g3 and e1 constantly, it would be an easy draw. So I played h4. Queen d6 prevents queen g3 because I will get my queen captured and I'll lose. Queen e4, going for the pawn. f6. This could lead to some problems, so I get my king out the way. There's no checks that are arriving on my king. Queen e7, and if I take the queen, he'll take back with a pawn and promote and win. And if I allow queen takes f7, I either get mated or worse, I'll get slowly squeezed to death with him probably trading queens in some way and then winning with the extra pawns. I try going for the draw, and it looks like I may have succeeded with queen f4, but he was very low on time here, and I, maybe stupidly, decided that perhaps if he tries getting out of it and tries, playing to win, he may end up getting really low on time and making another huge mistake. So now I play king g6. I'm still trying to hope for something. Queen e8, and then check a couple of times just to see if I can centralize the queen. And do a couple more checks. King f3, queen d3 check, queen e3, and I thought for a while, and then eventually I did queen f1, hoping I could win the g-pawn, but queen f2 was played. And surprisingly, for some of you, I actually took the queens off, because my thinking was my h-pawn actually dominates the g-pawn, and his only way to try and win is to take it with king f3 and g4. But my king can go to f5 in time. And if he tries g3, which I had thought he may try, then my pawn, surprisingly, is very, very quick. So if he tries pushing the h-pawn too quickly, I'll be able to run over and take it. And if he moves the king over to the h-file, I can play f5. So here, I don't really want this to happen because it would give him an extra move. So my idea was a5 and b5. And then I would have had a tricky decision because it doesn't look that important. But a takes b4, king f5, h4, and then I'm in a little bit of trouble here because his plan is to run his king over to my b-pawn in time while it will take me too long to get the h-pawn. It may still be drawn with correct play, but it is awkward. And the move a4, then if h4, I do have king f5, it's now his turn, so he's in Zugzwang, which is good for me. And if he tries king g4, then I have king e4. And we will, I think, draw the match with him playing h4, and then I have f5 check, which is a very important move to have. And it should be a drawn position. But he didn't play g3. He instead went king e3, I went king e5. Again, my h-pawn is really useful in holding the g-pawn back. Now b4, b6. Finally g3 is played, and I capture. Then king e4, I'm thinking maybe I can play f5. So he goes h4. I have to catch up, I have to keep my pawn running up the board. h5. King e3, necessary move. I need to stop the white king being able to run to f2 or to f1. So h6. I'm just in time with a check. f3. h7, and we both make queens. Then I didn't realise he would win a pawn off me. So this may be harder than I realised. Now I try with some checks. My a-pawn is guarded. And this is basically a draw. I'd try a few more moves because he's still low on time, but he knows how to defend this. I'm not going to play 30 moves to try and win. So I simply trade the queens, and then we capture each other's pawns and draw. So it wasn't the most exciting game ever, but I thought I did quite well to stop his attack and relieve the pressure. Although it was a rather risky strategy that I took near the end of the game. But overall, I'm happy with the draw, and the next London League match was played last Wednesday, so I'll also upload a video on the 4th London League game as well. So I hope you found the video useful. See you next time. Bye.